recording. Um, so welcome to the Open Humans Community Call on August 4th. And today's community call, we're going to try to explore sort of what a new user might need to know when, in particular, like when they're using Open Humans in the context of joining an activity or project on the site. And I'm trying to be careful to not say too much about what that is. This meeting is partly inspired by Paula, who was really awesome in sitting down and walking through the experience of joining Quantified Flu, which is an activity that's running using Open Humans, but it's also, confusingly enough, like built by Bastian and me. So there is a lot of potential for confusion between like what is Quantified Flu versus what is Open Humans, but it also provides provided a vignette on like what the experience is like and the confusions that occur, what is happening in Open Humans, what is happening in Quantified Flu, what a new user is trying to understand as they do this. And that process is something that Autistic, as it runs with Open Humans, or any projects that Morgan might run, might be relevant, or to Adi or Abik, who might want to understand, like, what are these? Can I join them? Or like, what do I do to be part of them? And so, or like, what are they? So I have created a set of 2 links. I'm just going to post this again. I think the only person who might not see this in the chat right now is Gary. These links are also in the community notes document. There's a link to Paula's slides from last week, and then a link to slides I made that I made editable by anybody, so we can all just like look at it and write on it if we'd like. And I guess I would suggest as a starting point to like look at those slides together. Gary posed a series of sort of new user questions as a slide that I moved to the top as the first slide. Do you think it would be helpful for me to do like a screen share and I look at the slides while we talk about them? I'm seeing nods. Okay, we'll see if I manage to do that. And remember that like I have enabled others to screen share, so we can all decide that like to grab the screen and throw down ideas, and you can make your own slides. Can you see the slides here?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're in this window now. I'm not going to try to present because if I do that, I'm going to lose focus. So I hope you can see it well enough.
Yeah, that works well.
Yeah, Gary, do you want to go through like the new user questions and maybe invite any other questions or feedback on which of these are ones that others might have?
So sure, I think everybody can read them and they'll find them pretty familiar. I mean, I just tried to model for myself a new user, which I have been. And so, yeah, so I would say just read them. And if you think about something, this contrasts with the inside view. Let me just say that, like from the inside view, you might think, okay, what's the difference between quantified between Quantified Flu and Open Humans? And, you might have a bunch of questions that are sort of highly specific. But for a new user, they're starting from a totally different place, right? Like, what does this do? And how do I sign up? So maybe you could think of some other new user questions.
So from there, I was actually thinking about that. What can my data do for me? I saw that what do you do with my data? And like the flip side of that of like, oh, hey, I would like to, just like freely contribute as much data as possible. So sort of like, how can I best go about doing that? And like an interface for me to like quickly understand, basically what's possible on the platform.
Today we had one user who asked what authorized project means, because we didn't really talk a lot about open humans, but on the front page of the Autistica wireframe, of the citizen science platform wireframe, there was how it works, and then log into open humans, and then it said authorized project, and they said they didn't understand it at all, what this means, and they said they would prefer something like give confirmation, or give consent for the project. I don't know if you use this formulation or if it was just the person doing the wireframe, but I think maybe that's not really clear.
Yeah, I think we had a long discussion last week already about the authorized language as well here. So
that particular process is the sort of what these following slides, because I feel like that's a real sticky point.
But I would just urge you not to see. This is a temptation.
This is like,
I would urge you not to explain the interface to your test group with wireframes, right? Because if you start doing that, then you've given us all a huge crutch, because then we can be like, well, wait, Mad, you know, like maybe actually, I'll intervene and just say, what if we went down a row, at least to start, and had at least, you know, the not Mads, not me, not Bastian, say, can you say in 2 or 3 sentences what the difference between quantified flu and open humans is? Because if we should be able to do that, or if we can't, then that shows something interesting, right? Like, could I just call on Morgan? Morgan, could you just say 3 sentences or 4 sentences? What's the difference between quantified flu and open humans?
Well, quantified flu is tracking a particular set of symptoms. I feel with using the Open Humans platform and a set of kind of like approved peripherals, approved wearables. Does that?
Yeah, that's good. Addy, do you want to say does that match your impression, or do you have something to add?
No, actually, that actually added to my impression, because I didn't know at all what the difference was. I actually don't even know what the difference between quantified self and open humans is completely. But that's, I think, a different question.
But that's good. That's good. I mean, this is very good to know, right? Like, this is the starting place. And Katerina?
I've never really looked at the Quantified Flu project, but I would say, like, from my understanding, Quantified Flu is a project within Open Humans that uses the consent system of Open Humans.
Okay.
And Davik, what about you?
So I'm thinking about, so Open Humans is kind of the back end for a lot of different projects. And then Quantified Flu is one of those projects. But as far as data rights, data access, who actually runs it? So with a lot of the other projects, it's like another organization that is like clearly separate from Open Humans, that is like using Open Humans as a platform for their backend. But for Quantified Flu, it's kind of confusing, because I'm like, is this a separate organization within the same one, or like, is it the same people? And so Quantified Flu is a separate project, but that doesn't tell me too much about like how it's actually set up on a like an organizational level.
And I also got the question if there are projects, like if Quantified Flu only exists on the Open Humans platform itself. So if it's really a project which is hosted completely on Open Humans, because the Autistica platform is something that only uses Open Humans backend and consent system as a login, but is the project platform itself. And so I don't know if there are different types of projects, if you can just make your project within Open Humans and if you can just use it as a backend.
Say that again, because that was very interesting. That was something new. Would you just say that once more?
Yeah, I wondered, because I didn't, like, I just looked a bit at Open Humans, and when I was working with Autistica, I saw that they only use the login of Open Humans. So they use it as a data storage and login in the backend, but they made their own platform on top of it. And I was wondering if there's another possibility to completely host your project on the Open Humans platform, like create new project on Open Humans, and then you've got the quantified flu project, for example. That makes any sense?
Mm-hmm.
So there are two different modes to operate.
I like that exercise because I think we've already exposed like at least 3 or 4 different kinds of confusions that are very, you know, would be very great to solve if there was a neat way to solve them, which there may or may not be. But I want to propose like a metaphorical solution and just see if it makes sense, not from a technical perspective, but just from a framework perspective, mental framework. If you were invited to join, say, a Facebook group on, I don't know, I'm part of like a local mushroom collecting society, okay, wild mushroom society. So if you're invited to join a wild mushroom group on Facebook, it's obvious, because we've all had so much experience, that the wild mushroom group will have its own administrator, its own rules and customs, but that I have to join Facebook in order to join the group. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't surprise me to be told when I was going to join the group to log into Facebook, for instance. Mm-hmm. Does that work as a metaphor for what the relationship between an activity, what we call an activity, such as quantified flu or Autistica, and open humans? Or from anybody's experience, is there something that doesn't quite add up about that?
For me, I would understand it in this way.
But for me, it's more of when you're on Facebook, it's kind of all on their platform. Whereas, you know, if I click on quantified flu, it takes me to a website with a different favicon and sort of saying, okay, hey, what actual parts of this project are on that platform versus on another platform? And then does that affect how my data is being used and those kinds of things? So it definitely seems as though, at least like tech stack wise, it covers, it integrates third parties as opposed to like host third parties.
Right. Very good point. Yeah.
But there is that Facebook authentication part that you could that is you know, that their OAuth 2 is separable.
And usually with just those like pure OAuth integrations, normally I see that as like, oh, this is like a totally different project that from Facebook that Facebook really doesn't have any control over, and they're just using their OAuth authentication framework. And so I think that Open Humans definitely does like more than like just authentication, because they also do like storage and like actual backend functions. But and have some level of control, right? Because I think that is a big part where it's like a Facebook group could be like moderated on some level by Facebook itself, and you know, Facebook kind of takes responsibility for that. But an external service using like some of Facebook's functionality, like login with OAuth, I would imagine that like, oh, Facebook doesn't really have a say over any random website that uses their OAuth, and that could be like, I don't think I'm very typical, and like I'm kind of a computer person, but that would be like kind of concerning for me of like, oh, what is this relationship, and like, is there control, or how much of an actual third party is this, that Open Humans can potentially enforce certain norms.
How do you think it works now? What is your mental model of the relationship in terms of control between a activity like quantified flu and Open Humans?
Quantified flu is kind of special because I see like Matt and Bastion on there, and I'm like, okay, right. I recognize these names even though like the organization isn't separate. But if I went to like one of these other ones, like genetics of personality type, I would assume that, okay, this is a researcher, just like a different project. I upload my data to Open Humans. They get a literal copy of it that they can download to their personal systems, run their inference in the sort, and also acknowledging that, hey, once it gets onto their personal systems, whether that's also web hosted or just like their computer, we just kind of trust them. And and it's like kind of off platform at that point, in a way. Of course, it's a social currency that we're operating on here, but.
Say that again, okay? Because I didn't totally follow like the last two sentences.
Yeah, so sort of saying, I joined this group or project, and the project is run by someone at, let's say, like NYU, and they're doing a research study. And so they join this group. So when I upload my data, it uploads to Open Humans like backend, and then Open Humans shares it with that person at NYU for them to be able to download and use on their own systems. And so once they've downloaded and used it on their own systems, it is like technically off platform in a way where it's like there isn't as much transparency as to what they're doing with it. Although we are just, kind of trusting them to, follow up with that social contract.
So do you, in that model, in your mind, do you consider yourself as still having a relationship with Open Humans? You described a process of like joining an activity, uploading data to Open Humans, the managers of that activity downloading your data, right? And being trusted to just do something with it. So where does that leave Open Humans in your mind? Are you still relating to them, or have they just, kind of facilitated a transfer?
I think it's definitely the facilitated a transfer in my current model, because I'm sure
Right.
that there's features that I'm unaware of at this point.
Right.
But yeah, in my current model, it's sort of just a place to host like multiple modalities, so just like a variety of different personal data streams in a way that it can be readily used by a variety of different parties and leverage better, which is a very powerful platform in my mind. So maybe that's why I think that that's its only function, because it's like already very useful. But as soon as the connection has happened, then its role, I've not experienced its role beyond that.
So with then that almost sounds like Open Humans in your model is just providing kind of a virtual private server or a cloud service for you to use as a resource in transferring your data to different activities.
Mm-hmm. As well as like a discovery platform for other researchers and projects that are hoping to use that data. And yeah, but definitely on that kind of metadata level, like data and connecting level is the only way that me honestly also kind of as a newcomer, like I have poked around a little bit, but it still kind of confuses me, but that is like my current model.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm curious whether that resonates, say, like, with Morgan or Addie or anybody else, like this idea that Open Humans is functionally and just sort of a back end, your own kind of private back end for data sharing.
Yeah, Addie, you're saying something in the chat?
Yeah, so I was going to the Open Humans website and I was seeing it with fresh eyes, almost because I've never really explored it too much anyways. And I was seeing the first three things on there was the Keating Memorial and Quantified Flu, and there was another option, I think Juno's Exploratory. So I'm just trying to, and then I clicked on Explore and Share, and then I also clicked on Add Data. And all of these three places had little boxes with names on it. And for example, Twitter analysis, and Add Data and Explore and Share both had Twitter analysis. What I'm trying to understand is the relationship between what Quantified Flu is to Open Humans the exact same as the relationship between what Twitter analysis is to Open Humans? Is Quantified Flu just another, like when you say activity, which is something that I just heard here, if Quantified Flu is an activity, through Open Humans is Gut Instinct by Vineet Pandey, which is something that I see on the Explore and Share. Is that also an activity on Open Humans? Is it the exact same thing?
You would expect it. That's what you're saying, is that to you, it looks like the exact same thing.
So because those three things had their own special place on the homepage, I was confused. But if it was all in the same place, or if it was just featured, which I think it says, if it's just featured projects, I would be inclined to think, okay, yeah, they're all just different activities, if that's the word we're using. And Quantified Flu and Kitting Memorial are just up and coming right now. But if I go to Explore and Share, it's the exact same thing. Open Humans is the platform, and there's these different hosted event sort of things, or like activities where people can go, and it takes you to its own little world, and you can put the data there and play around with that stuff, and then you can come back to Open Humans, and there's another portal to another different world if you want to go there.
Right. I mean, I think that's certainly a reasonable schema, I think, to have in mind for these different kind of entities. Yeah. It may not be totally clear from the existing presentation, but I think something like that is what is the goal, to make something like that pretty clear.
So
go ahead.
Quick question. Do we, in Open Humans, do we call these things activities always?
Right,
or do we call them projects?
Right now that's ambiguous. They were called projects, and now the name is activities. But I think certainly Matt and Bastian and whoever they could change the name, right, if it turned out to be super clear. So I don't think there's like a huge attachment to some particular name, but you are absolutely right. Projects, the old projects are the new activities.
Right. Projects was the historic name. Then I felt the activity would be a better choice, but it's like whatever helps.
Whatever works to make it clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I think that if I went on Open Humans and I saw featured activities with like a capital A, and I just assume that this is the terminology that Open Humans follows, and I go to Explore and Share, and even there it says like activities, so explore and share your data in these activities with a capital A, I would just be completely okay with understanding that all these things are the same thing, and there's something called activities, which is like the blogs or the groups on Facebook.
Yes, and once that's nice and clear, and the overall little schema is super clear, it's also possible to explain what an activity is in one sentence, right, too. So anybody who's confused can do that. So I think that's like why it's really interesting to talk through these details of what is confusing, because then we can just try to clear it up.
Intuitively, I would prefer projects, I think. Was there a special reason to rename it to activities?
We are very interested in self-research and anticipated the possibility of supporting people talking or discussing self-research projects. And that becomes very confusing. And this started to become confusing in the forums, where people are talking about their self-research projects, but they're not projects that undergo sort of project review and approval processes. So there's a series of governance processes around group projects or activities. And so using the word project and having the namespace clashes with self-research projects was a concern.
Okay, so activities is a broader term in general, and because project
a project can be a self-research project, it can be a personal project, whereas an activity connotes like that you are going to go do something, so I guess one thought is that activity is a thing that you go do with other people.
I think their nomenclature, has to be sort of decided on and then communicated about to stick. And there isn't a perfect, intuitive word necessarily, but the most important thing about the ambiguity that we're teasing out here, I think, is that there's multiple layers of the system. There's this platform layer. I think people are pretty comfortable calling Open Humans a platform. And then there's a layer of things that are organized to do with people kind of putting serious time into using the platform to invite individuals to engage in a process. And so then the individuals are at a third layer, right? So there's open humans, there's, you know, quantified flu, to use the example, and then there's the people who are using quantified flu who may be doing their own thing, which you could maybe call projects. So whatever the nomenclature is will get worked out, but it's just important to try to understand, you know, that there's those three layers and that has to be made clear.
And maybe something to throw into the verbiage bucket when we're trying to figure out what's intuitive might be an initiative. That sounds kind of like very kind of institutionalized to me, where it's like, oh, this is an initiative by some group and, you know, kind of separate from an individual. But I'm sure that there's many cultural considerations and it's more than just me using it.
Right. So yes, go ahead, Bastian.
So one thing would be interesting to explore the difference between the add data and explore and share, because Adi already like briefly like talked about the confusion of this and whether like what people expect to be the difference between the things, like let's call them things for now, that are listed under add data and the things listed under explore and share.
Is my screen still presenting? I'm still presenting here. And I'm taking notes.
Still see. Yeah.
And you're watching me take notes as you speak. I guess I can open another tab. Would somebody else like to take notes on the slides while I open another tab?
I can take the notes and you can show the screen.
Let's see. I guess I need to be logged out. So I hope I can. Oh, good. I am logged out. Because that's going to be the unified view that everyone sees. So here, should I go ahead and click? I think the question, I guess the question here is like, what do people think these mean?
Exactly.
Something that did confuse me on that was in the add data versus explore and share, some of the activities are the same. So I, like with the genetics and personality type, add data kind of says, okay, add a data stream, like create an integration, create just like, here's raw data that can be used for a variety of different activities. But then when I go to explore and share and I see like the same, like the Twitter archive analyzer or these various items, I'm like, wait, was this add data available to multiple activities using the same data stream, or was this just for a specific activity? And so, yeah, basically, I still don't really know.
Is that actually how it works? Because that makes sense. Is it actually that when you go to add data and you add data, it maybe shows you a check mark saying, oh yeah, your personality data is in here, because of which you can now freely participate in these activities. So when I add data, it opens up avenues from the activities page. But if I go to an activity, I'm enrolling for a specific activity. Is that how it works?
Open question.
Like
I'm trying not to answer things
Yes,
unless like Ray tells me to.
So then I guess
exactly correct. Yes.
So yeah, so my confusion was mainly because I was seeing the same names on both tabs. So then I felt like I was not understanding something about the difference. So like, should I start understanding the difference between these two things? If they had no similar names, I'd be like, okay, these are completely different things. I'm going to start understanding what add data is first, and then I will understand what explore and share is. But if what Avik just said is true, that add data means, for example, there was just like a listing on add data, suppose Fitbit, Twitter, keeping pace, like steps. And when I went into one of those, I uploaded my data and it just showed me like a check mark saying, yeah, this data is with Open Humans. And this is what you can do because of that. It would make sense that now I can explore the activities, or if I don't want to do that, I can just go to the activities in explore and share and add data to a specific activity that I want to take part in. If
So
that's how
Adi,
it works.
I have a question for you. So if you think about adding data, what do you think that you're adding data to?
I think that when I upload my Fitbit data, it is Open Humans has an account for me, and Open Humans has so many different avenues in which my data can fit if I wanted it to. So Open Humans has a Fitbit account for me. It has a genome account for me. It has a steps data account for me. It has a Google location history account for me. And if I want, I can check mark all of these accounts and let Open Humans have this data of mine. And when I enable Open Humans to have this data of mine, it can let me take part in all these different activities because of it.
Okay,
And
so
if I don't want,
yes, that sounds very clearly like what you're saying, and just tell me if I'm wrong, that when you add data, you think you are going to add data to Open Humans, to the platform.
absolutely.
And that having done that, then that gives you some things, further things that you can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
when I add data, it goes to Open Humans, and Open Humans keeps it and gives it to the other, and supplies it to other activities when I want to take part in those activities.
So in your mental model, if this page that we're seeing right now on the screen share where it says add data, if it said add data to Open Humans, I'm not saying it should, but if it did, it wouldn't contradict your model. That would be very.
Yeah, I feel like
Right.
that would be almost redundant. Like it makes the
Right.
same thing to me.
Exactly. Okay, add data to Open Humans. Okay, I think that's good to have said out loud. And for anybody that kind of contradict their sense of what they would be doing here, that adding data is adding data to Open Humans, not to a particular activity.
I understood it in the same way, actually. I thought add data means just adding it to your account, and but not project related. And if you go to explore and share, you can explore the projects and share your data with these projects. But I also stumbled a bit upon that they're the same project displayed. If you click on add data and on explore and share, I would have, for explore and share, it's fine, I think. But for add data, I would have expected that there would be just types of data that you can upload, like upload your Twitter data or upload your Fitbit data or something. And I wouldn't have expected projects there.
Okay.
For me, it was kind of the opposite, where I when I saw add data, I assumed that it was just kind of a repository of all these different projects. And when I would add data to one, I basically have to like connect and authorize various projects to the like base data stream. So whether the data stream was coming like directly from Fitbit or whether that data stream was actually hosted on Open Humans. And so I had to go on my mental model was that each one of these activities is kind of separate, and then I'd have to go into each one of them and then individually manage, upload, kind of almost my personal relationship with that project. And that wasn't as facilitated through Open Humans, even though I thought it'd be really cool if it was the former case where it was facilitated by Open Humans and I just like gave my data for them, and then they could handle all of the interactions between these various activities.
Okay, this is super interesting. And I think, again, it's good not to try to settle on terminology, but it sounds like there are two separate concepts that need two separate labels. One is add data to Open Humans, and the other is add data or share or permission or authorize or whatever the terminology is to a specific activity. And that whatever changes are made, it should be try to be crystal clear that those two things conceptually are different, even if in some ways they're similar, technically, like once you authorize data on one project, maybe it's.
You know what makes a lot of sense to me already, which I feel like a lot of people might intuitively understand, is that on my phone, and it's an Android phone, I don't know if this is the same way for Apple, but I'm seeing the activities to be like apps and my data to be like the software, right? The
operating system.
The operating system.
Yeah.
So what I understand is when I give all my data, like my contacts and my camera access and all of that to my phone, that's like giving my data to Open Humans. And when I download a new app, it says, okay, Pokemon Go wants permission to access your camera, your location, your contacts. Then I'm like, yes, give this activity of Open Humans access to my Fitbit data, give it access to my health data, give it access to this data, that data. That would make a lot of intuitive sense to me, that Open Humans just takes all this data and keeps it. And then it's like I've enabled those things for later use in these activities. And when that activity, when I choose to click on that activity and say, okay, I want to play around with this one, it says, okay, do you authorize Open Humans to give us your Fitbit data, your location data, stuff like that? And I can just say yes, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I realized this add data versus explore and share like actually during this meeting, like actually like 15 minutes ago, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
I think this is really useful. I think this is really useful, like to separate those kind of steps, at least, you know, design-wise. Yeah.
But can you actually just upload data without having it being related to a project? Because I don't find the option here. If I click on add data, it's just you have to choose a project before or create your own project. Or can you just say, okay, I upload some Fitbit data just of 2 weeks Fitbit data or something to your personal account? Or does it always have to be like related to a project?
I actually don't know the answer to that.
The answer
Yeah,
right
so-
now is it has to be a project.
Okay.
One of the features we've discussed is file upload, but in general, anything that's a continuous synchronization, like continuously updating your Fitbit data, is going to be built in this modular way. I have a question or a point or something that's like burning a hole in me, so I feel like I need to say it. What happens if an activity seeks data from another activity, but also produces new data?
I think that might be scalable to that same permission structure that Adi was talking about, where let's say one of the data takes in your Fitbit heart rate and then relates that to like some stress heuristic, and then another one does like interday stress monitoring, and then just saying like, oh, this project would like permissions to these raw data streams and then these outputs from other activities, kind of thing. Might be, and this might also be 0% how it's set up. So like, I apologize in advance to like you and Bastian and everyone who like actually has to deal with making it happen.
I mean, like, how should it look here? Yeah.
How should it what, Matt?
Well, how would you expect it to look if like, what would you expect for an activity that took your Fitbit data and then produced a stress heuristic and then I guess could deposit that back?
So like in my account, and then I think in my data, how it has like connected data sources, and then you can just see like a bunch of these different JSON files, and sort of saying like whether that is coming like raw from a like data source, or if that's being generated by another activity, kind of having that common format of like, oh, this is like when you go onto your apps drawer and you can see just like all of the apps, no matter like what they're connected to, just like a common place to see, oh, here's everything that you can possibly connect. Do you think that might work? I also have not tried that specific use case of like enabling an activity that like requested data from another activity and those kinds of things. But
so, and also, Mad, why say one or two more sentences about why that was a burning question for you? Like, what do you see as the kind of confusion, maybe even in your own mind, about how that should work?
Because I guess the way I have thought of the explore and share is that's where you see things that you can take data to do something new with. And add data is like how you get the data that you add to them. But unfortunately, a lot of things are kind of like you can do something with the data, but then it will also add data. It turns into that, like which of these screens should it be, or is it on both, or is it represented differently on both? I mean, I think we do need to dig into like why are there some things showing up on both of these screens?
And I mean, quantified flu is like a prime example, which takes a lot of data from different sources, but it also deposits new symptom reports in your Open Humans account. So it's now, is it adding data or exploring and share, or is it both?
One of the things I think, because we have like 10 minutes to go and we can open up new topics too, but one of the things that came out in the earlier part of the discussion that I think is powerful, even if it's wrong, is that people tend to see Open Humans as a platform that's providing a generalized kind of store and control function for your own data that you're adding to Open Humans and is in kind of your virtual, private server, right? So this is the metaphor somehow. And if you follow that metaphor, it's possible that one could represent that in some way, and that projects that or activities that you join and share data with to generate new data, then deposit it back into some like your own personal activity space or something like that, where all of these things in some way are represented as being yours. But I mean, how to do that and whether it's easy or possible is, of course, an open question. But I think that metaphor that emerged early in the conversation kind of seems to be controlling how people are thinking about it. And it would mean that these two screens are actually would end up being quite different. One of them would be mine, and the other would be all the things that are being potentially done.
Yeah, I just want to say that would be amazing if I could just have that comfort and security to understand that Open Humans is my bank, and I only need to trust Open Humans, because any other application that I'm running with Open Humans is already tested by Open Humans. So if one of the tabs just said your data bank, and I put my data in it and it shows up there, and if some application generates some data, it also stores it there. I can just see everything that's mine. It would just give me a lot of security and comfort. And then there would be another tab which can then ask me to use some of the data if I want to engage in that activity. And that would just be super clear. And I'm seeing these activities as applications now, literally like apps on a phone.
I think I'd like to check in with Morgan and Katerina, because in particular, Katerina has already experienced Autistica, and it's a very different context maybe, and it would be good to hear like what your conceptualization of all of this is.
Just one question before I just wondered, is there an overview somewhere of all the types of data that you can upload? I would expect that when I would click on add data, that there's like a list of types of data that you can upload. Or are there restrictions at all? I don't know how it works. Like, can you upload any type of data?
That's a great question to just note, right? Like, that's a good user question, right? What kind of data can I add?
Yeah.
And how do I know what I've already added, for instance? These are a really good question.
And Paula, these slides are great. 10 out of 10.
I wasn't answering it because I don't want to answer too much.
Exactly. But Matt, you were also asking, did you want to know like how that looks from the perspective of somebody running an activity? Is that why you asked that original question to Katerina?
Yeah, like whether they feel comfortable seeing what they want to do represented in this language and context, or how they see it fitting into that language and context.
If you were starting something using the Open Humans platform and expecting to recruit participants to share their data.
What we would do then? Or what are you asking?
Yeah,
how would I proceed?
What do you see as like would need to be clarified in order for you to do that easily? Like, would you be able to explain what you were asking people to do?
I think, sorry.
Since I feel like we need to unpack what Autistica is doing in particular, because it's it's not actually requesting any existing data in Open Humans.
Okay.
It is doing yet another thing that hasn't been raised here, is the capacity for a research study to give its participants access to the data they're contributing in the course of the research. And so functionally, it is acting as a data source.
That was how I understood it, because we were only working on the front end in Autistica, so I don't really know how it's working technically, and so I just imagined how it would be working, and I imagined that you use Open Humans to log in to the Autistica platform, and then that the data that you enter via the Autistica interface is stored on the Open Human servers. So this is really the backend, the server, the database where everything is stored and where they can then always log in and access their data, but via the interface of Autistica.
It's almost like, I hope I'm not talking too much, but it's almost like when you see an add data panel, what I'm hearing from like Adi is imagining data that something else can use. Like you might not be interested in adding something listed on that add data panel that's not going to be like a necessary precursor for another thing. And so like your reasons to see it there is with the belief that there's another thing that's going to use it.
From my understanding, sorry. From my understanding, it's that interesting if like I was a researcher and would like to start a project, it would be interesting for me to see if Open Humans can process the type of data that I'm interested in. So just to generally inform yourself if the type of research you want to do is possible with Open Humans.
As well as like an ease of startup thing, I think for me, where it's sort of I think you're right, where it's like a lot of these projects act like their own data sources in a lot of ways. And that might not be intuitive for me coming on saying like, oh, what is the format? What do they actually collect? There's like a lot of kind of ambiguity in my mind as just a casual user on what this project does. And so this place potentially being for really straightforward stuff like Spotify, Fitbit, 23andMe, like, okay, I can like quickly and straightforwardly upload that data as well as like have an intuitive understanding of like kind of what that is and how other systems might use it. But with other, I think like you said, like equally valid data sources, like very specific projects carried out by various groups, it's functionally similar, but just like intuitively different.
There's something really different about adding the data from something that's completely separate to the Open Humans ecosystem, like Spotify, to adding data from a research study that you've joined through Open Humans.
But why is it different? I mean,
I think that's the intuitive difference. Abik, I think that you're the one who's describing a difference there. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that it's just basically one is me-centered and one is like other-centered, and sort of saying like when I upload my Spotify data, it's sort of me-centered data, like my Fitbit data, my XYZ data. But when it's a data source from like a project or an outside platform, it's sort of more active interface data that is like more structured for that specific kind of research study. And maybe does that me-centered versus other-centered kind of like, is that verbiage?
Well, it's just the question of, I think the question is, does it intuitively feel like a different thing? Like if you're thinking of Open Humans as kind of your data storage and sharing platform, how does it change your perspective on that, whether you're adding Fitbit data or whether you're adding data that only gets created because you've joined an activity on Open Humans? You know, is that difference? Like I could imagine, for instance, I work for a bank and I get a paycheck from the bank and then I deposit my paycheck in the bank. But when I deposit my paycheck in the bank, I'm just a customer of the bank. It doesn't really matter that I work for the bank in terms of how I imagine the bank working. So that would be the saying that it could be accommodated to that overall metaphor. But it may be that it can't be because you might have governance questions that are dominating your, perspective or something.
Yeah, and I think that with the money analogy, I think that with money, like every dollar is the same, no matter like where you get it from. But with this kind of data, it's kind of different, where it's sort of like Spotify probably has more standard interface, but when I joined Quantified Flu, it generated a JSON document for me, but like I don't actually know where to spend that money. Like it's kind of different. I don't understand the structure as intuitively.
I think this opens up, and we don't have time to get very deeply into it, but it opens up like a really genuine question, yeah.
Could there be a distinction between raw data, where raw is this automatically collected, and then there is this not raw? I don't know the right terminology for it.
Okay.
I'm sick of sharing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if it's already been mentioned.
No,
no, you're good. Okay. Yeah, we're definitely trying to figure out garbage.
Sorry, didn't hear that.
Oh, so was your question like a distinction between raw data and processed data? And I'm really wary of that, because raw is raw, like there's different layers of data processing, and so raw means a different thing to a different person. Yeah, I mean, I come back from like my work with data and bioinformatics, and people are like, I want your raw genetic read data, and I give it to them, and they're like, no, I didn't want that, I wanted the processed one.
I think Dick said something really interesting though that helps with this question, and from a user perspective, which is, he said, money, I know where to spend. If I get $1, it doesn't matter where I get it from, I know where to spend it. But there's some kind of, that's important, right? There's some kinds of data that we have a place for in our mental model of like our data landscape, right? Fitbit data. That's because a lot of work has been done to teach us that, right? Like it didn't come that way, but millions, tens of millions of dollars have been spent like explaining what Fitbit data is and how you're supposed to use it. So naturally we understand what it means to store our Fitbit data. Whereas there's a whole other kind of data, like the kind that's being generated by Quantified Flu, that isn't even clear to us it's data while we're participating in Quantified Flu necessarily. Like what part of it is kind of formalizable, representable, storable, shareable. So I think that opens, like, it's a very good question. It can't be really resolved, but I think we did our job in sort of like framing it so clearly. It's possible, for instance, just to give an example, that we could shift the burden for that onto the activity creator. Like maybe the activity creator says, when you do this activity, you generate this kind of thing and it will be stored on Open Humans. That's kind of hard. I mean, I don't know if they have the capacity to do that because they have to kind of teach people what they're doing, or maybe there's other solutions, but I do think it's a genuine difference, and you know, it has to be somehow explained.
But something I've interacted with recently, I recently got this MuseS headband, and like with EEG data, unlike Fitbit data, it is, even to me, like not very exactly clear what kind of processing is done before or after, and saying, oh, did you already do a notch filter? Did you already do this filter? Is like the sort? And organizing it by, at least for me as a hardware developer, like by hardware platform, there's certain algorithms that are implemented on the like firmware level of like, oh, we automatically remove these noise, like this noise, we produce these features, this metadata. And you're totally right, it is like not technically raw data. They are like pre-extracted features, but yeah, and of course it's like a non-actual like solution is the heuristic, but it is just like, oh yeah, organizing it by kind of like hardware platform. It's like, okay, you just kind of know what you're getting when you say, I'm going to connect my Muse or I'm going to connect my Fitbit. Because I'm sure the Fitbit, as we know, like also does its own heuristics and processing. Yeah.
Like, to me, the differentiation seems to be between the more or less independently created data and the dependently created data as part of a research study, for example. Because like independent would be Spotify, Fitbit, you just like get a device or use the service and you just create the data because you want to create it. While if you join a study, then you do it basically, as you said, it's basically outward facing. It's like you're doing it for someone else, but they are also giving you a copy. So I think that's a differentiation that makes more sense to me intuitively somehow, I have to say. As I feel like one thing is I can do on my own time if I feel like doing it, and the other thing is like it's in a much more structured, rigorous way.
I was
is it maybe maybe that I'm misinterpreting? I sort of I'm starting to seeing it as like passive and active. So like I'm passively tracking things, whether it's wearing something or, and then there's this, if I'm participating in a research study, I don't know if all research studies fall into this umbrella, but I'm adding something to it. Like for the quantified flu, I'm adding symptoms. So I'm being active about it. While Fitbit, I'm passively wearing something on my wrist. I don't know if that kind of.
Yeah, I think even this breaks down. So for 23andMe, you have to actively spit into a tube and mail it somewhere, and it's not passively done. And nevertheless, it's something you can do on your own. So I think there's probably a lot of ways to subdivide this thing. And I'm not sure yet we have figured out what the right division is between these things, which feel different to some of us at least.
Well, I mean, simplifications are good though, because like if you don't provide some level of abstraction.
And I know Addie wants to say something too. So let's...
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to add my pair of words also, because I feel like it sort of encapsulates what I've been understanding in this conversation. And this is how I'm seeing it, is provided data and collected data. And I'm saying this in relationship to open humans. So when I have Fitbit data, I have Spotify data, I have all this like Aura data, right? All of this data is what I provided to open humans. My voice is echoing. But collected data is what I collect, you collected for me through Open Humans, and then you stored on Open Humans in my bank. So I would still like to see that difference, because one is the data that I gave to Open Humans by telling it to, like giving it permission to take it from Fitbit or Spotify and whatever. And the other is that the researchers collected on from me. So it's the difference between me giving and someone taking it from me, you know? So it was just being the provided collected difference that now I understand.
Yeah, very interesting.
And visualization wise, I was just thinking that I run into similar problems in my work, you know, bringing a lot of different sensors and figuring out different layers of feature extraction. And I definitely visualize it in my head as a graph or a tree, and sort of saying, hey, you set up this tree of processing pipelines that can take in different sensor data, form features, extract metadata from that, and then that can feed into other nodes. And you set up your graph, and then as data is produced on any of the leaf nodes, then it just propagates through, and all of these activities can update, producing data and feeding data into each other. And yeah, I don't know if that might be a intuitive way to visualize this kind of like layers of feature extractors and data sources, the generalized node, which takes in information, and of course, if it's like an external integration, then that's a leaf node, but has inputs and has outputs, and then can be arbitrarily linked up if that applies in this kind of situation.
I just like to pipe up and say, based on kind of what I've heard, I think this is really useful feedback. And I think there's a lot here that can help clarify and simplify as like our focus group. And maybe just to open it up, since I kind of grabbed the reins moderating, to anybody making some last comments, and also for Matt, for you to take back the reins and close or set us up for the next thing.
I mean, one thing I would give people the chance to is to now actually ask questions and get an answer. Because I think it could be frustrating for people who did ask questions, and Matt and I were like, we will not tell you the answer.
Okay, yeah.
Good. Very good.
Yeah, were there questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I have so many questions. So Open Humans, does it actually have like servers that store data? Like, it does.
Yes, it's storing data files. It's using cloud services to store them, but it is when you have an account, you add data as files.
Do I have a limit on how much data I can ask Open Humans to store for me? Okay.
No.
Some quick more questions. Can it store my like photo video data in case I want to do some OCR analysis and stuff? No. If I wanted to see how people reoccur in my life through my photos,
yeah,
that's too much data.
Well, we don't support any data sources that are related to photos. Videos are particularly data heavy, and we
Makes
haven't
sense.
attempted to support those. Photos, not so bad, I don't think. That hasn't been a type of data source that has been set up. That said, it's could potentially exist.
Addie, if you're interested in that, there's a QS community participant who's like one of the great world experts in that stuff, who has like 10 years of video and photo data. So I can connect you with him. He's really thought a lot about storage and analysis of like.
Can I just email all of you people? Like, is that a possibility? Okay, so can I get emails? Like, how do I find these things?
There's Slack.
Oh, there's a Slack? Oh, yeah.
There's a Slack, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I can just text on the Slack.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Exactly. That's the. And then you don't have to wait for getting on top of the email pile we are all fighting against. You are more likely to get an answer on Slack than via email.
Also, question. So the data is hosted on OpenHumans, just storage-wise, like an S3 bucket kind of status. And then when it's quantified flu, that is like a full different program running on a different virtual machine that is also run by OpenHumans. Like it comes out of their bank account. However, it is like a different machine that just does different processing on that same data.
Yeah, it's like its own deployment on Heroku, which just uses the OpenHumans API as any other project uses it, or any other activity uses the APIs. Right?
Okay, this is good information.
Otherwise, to just like answer the question of why some things appear in add data and explore and share, because this was not explicit. So some projects like the Twitter archive thing, which was mentioned, which I made, you upload your Twitter archive through this tool, but it also analyzes the data and gives you visualizations. So it does both things at the same time. That's why it's confusingly in both categories. It's not just adding data and then you can't do anything with it. It also provides a service on your data, but it's also the method in which you deploy the data in the bank. That's why some things show up in multiple categories.
Yeah, and so does the quantified flu, right? Where it also visualizes and like does some functional things as well as producing that JSON output. And that was the thing where it's like, okay, so none of the data processing happens on OpenHumans. All of the data processing happens on these other services.
Right.
I still think it's useful though to say the data sources page could just look entirely different because it's describing a different functional purpose. It could list some of the same things, but if they look visually different on the list, your context is different.
Yeah, and this also like goes back to one of the questions I see in the slides I wrote on. Is there a way I can see all the data types that are available in OpenHumans? And it's like, yes, it's the add data page. In principle, it's all the data types you can have. But apparently that's also not clear to people using it. So that's another.
And also unspoken here is the as yet partially finished data types feature for OpenHumans, which would recategorize. So right now data is being managed, authorized, or consented to sharing according to the data source, like the activity or project it came from. But we've discovered that's too limiting, so we have some other way of organizing it. But that I could imagine like data types, like the data import being structured according to data type or something like that. That'd be an easier way to browse it. You'd be like, oh, look at all the different genetic data types. Look at all the different like social media types.
Any other burning questions which we forgot to answer?
Last question, I'm sorry. Geno's exploratory, is that like the primary thing that was the idea when OpenHumans was created, or is it just like another activity? You know,
because it's not just like another activity. So, but it's also not something that was there at the start.
So
it is
like, no, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
It is set up using the same OAuth system that the activities use. And so it is like another activity in that way, although we've given it a special type of permission where it has access to any data. It has the ability to request access to all data in the account, so that when you run things, and it's operated by us, so it's not operated by someone else.
So my question was, because that's an amazing platform, it's just such a good opportunity to play around with my own data. Suppose I start creating something there that's like, I feel like, you know, has potential. What about like copyrightation and stuff? Because people can just come and, you know, take that code, right?
By default, the notebooks are not shared. So, I mean, you need to actively share the notebooks publicly. So you can develop notebooks privately in your virtual machine. And
okay, cool.
And just to answer the question of what Open Humans initially was, and I think it's pretty much the model that many of you had in mind, which was like being just a backend for collecting the data and sharing it with research groups, basically. I think that's, Matt might correct me on this, but I think like it was very much focused on the individual giving permission to studies to use the data. And like the whole thing we are discussing now is like it's evolved quite a bit from this initial idea.
I think,
Which I think makes everything
untouched
more
on
confusing.
here is where we want to go. It's almost like this is a retrospective on confusion about where we've been.
What are your thoughts?
Like where we want to go? Like I'm not interested in having the data so much as enabling people to put that data to use. So I see a lot of potential in the notebooks, and that the exploratory and maybe having native representations of notebooks that you do want to share with others, and better support for like being able to load data that you might run a notebook on if you want to do it that way. But to be clear, agnostic about whether we actually hold data or not, and much more interested in the abilities to use the data. And the actual holding of the data is there to enable that use of the data. And that goes from personal use to collective use and group projects. I'm still interested in seeing studies like use it to deposit and return data to their participants. That's always made me really angry when research studies collect a bunch of data and don't give it back to people. That dates back to my work in genetics, where they don't give people their genomes. They're like, oh, sorry, it's ours to see, not yours. But also recognizing like there's not a lot of demand out there from research participants to get their own data. So it's not going to be like a big use case. It's like a great ethical argument. But Bastian, do you want to add to that? Like, where do you want to go? Oh, Bastian has like a pithy phrase about open humans. Do you remember what I'm referring to? He said,
no idea.
I go to Open Humans and I'm like, where are the humans? That is to say that your experience of a cold platform without like social stuff is a bit like, it feels like, should it be like that way? I think that our feeling is, if we want to enable more people putting uses to their data, there needs to be some level of social interaction. And so we have these calls and the Slack. And the question is like, what should the platform look like? You have what exists now, but that doesn't mean it should be that way. Like, should it have more social features? If you see what people are doing, you're able to send messages, or like, what does that mean to have something, to see the humans in Open Humans?
I like that a lot. Yeah. Seconded.
Yeah, I like that phrase. I go to Open Humans and where are the humans?
Are there certain projects that enable you, like when I was joining Quantified Flu, there was a list of members. So like I could theoretically reach out to them, right? Like on Slack or something?
Yeah, there's even like a totally buried function, I think, to allow receiving messages in Open Humans and to receive them. And it was built in like at the start, but because of design stuff, people don't realize those things are there, or they're not implemented in ways that make them very usable. So in theory, you can reach out to other members on Open Humans directly by sending them a message through Open Humans, but that's not something they're aware of. Another thing that this discussion didn't touch on at all, but is a powerful feature for a lot of projects that want to operate on the site, is that capacity to send people messages via anonymous IDs, which those people then receive in their emails. A lot of projects prefer to operate with anonymity with the people they're interacting with, they are, say, encouraging to collect new data or share data with them. And they might want to interact with those people further to invite them to do a survey or whatever. And Open Humans is acting as a steward so that they can communicate with those individuals without those individuals having to share their email addresses.
And just, yeah, I mean, there's the member lists that you can see, and I mean, if you click on see all members, you are taken to the API backend, basically, which just gives you a JSON of the members. But even if you go through the trouble, there's very little reason why you would message any of these people, because you just see their names, but you don't know anything about them. So it's...
They don't have a news feed or a blog on Open Humans that they're updating, or...
What if it was automatically generated from their data? That'd be exciting.
They'd have to authorize that, I guess. Like, do they want to be public? That's another nuanced thing here that we didn't touch on. It's like the whole process of like, which stuff do you want to share and when, and what decisions are you making?
Because the Keating Memorial had a discourse. So that was a unique type of project. Do other projects have a discourse?
So the discourse is still there and for everyone to use. It's so I just made for a project we hopefully launch at some point this week, and I hope tomorrow, about a survey for coronavirus. We made like a subsection in the forum for like participants to chat there. And in principle, other projects could do the same. And I mean, we have the categories for self-research and just general chat, I think, and a couple of other ones. So people can use it, but we are not really advertising the forum as much. I'm not even sure if at all, maybe in the footer of the website, but I would not bet on it.
One of the dangers of trying to encourage every project to have a chat zone is that you have a bunch of deserts. Or there's like, maybe there could be comments on the site, and these are all ideas. I do want to say that the discourse forum you asked about, Paula, has a functional purpose in our governance, and that any activities that seek to deploy in Open Humans such that other people can see them and they have API caps removed, do undergo consensus review process. So they post what they're doing in the forums, and then other people can weigh in and say, it looks good to me, it looks like they're authentic, or explaining what they're going to do. It's not a full-on audit of their systems, but it is a review of like, I read what they say they're going to do and it sounds reasonable. Well, we shouldn't drag on to it forever. And I feel like now I've said too much about what Open Humans is doing. And Gary's like, you've spoiled them. Now you can never use them.
I think we've done our work as a focus group for today. And, you know, I think there's a lot to chew on. It'll take some time, and then we can do this again and invite a couple of other people in too. But
so future meetings, Bastian had moved to had suggested that we move to, was it once a month meetings for the community calls, but maintain our self-research calls as like an informal chat every week. So do people here feel happy with meeting on, I guess the first Tuesday of September would be September 1st as a schedule for the next community call, and we can shift. I'll put it out for a vote. Like,
That
is there a motion to amend?
That day totally works, but I'm gonna miss you guys.
We'll still do the Thursday meetings every Thursday.
True.
These calls are meant to be more about like Open Humans in general, and maybe once a week has been a bit much.
That works for me, and I have to say I will miss you again in self-research. I'm finally getting a family break, so I'll be gone on Thursday, but I'll be back the week after.
All right,
Great. So I move to close the meeting.
Okay, thanks. That's really great feedback. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time. It's been really useful. Thank you.
Yes. Bye, friends.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.